Okay, I am now going to begin a project using agentic coding in Emacs with gptel. I have done, or will have done, a video about how to make the prompt that works really well for agentic coding. If you already have one that you use maybe in any other tool that does that, that might immediately translate into gptel. I'm not sure. I want to go through what I'm calling my one true holy and apostolic agentic coding prompt is, because I have not had a good one up to this point, which is why I have delayed making this video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start a project that is actually something dear to me and I want to see done, that will have a back-end component and a front-end component and use agentic coding along the way, but I'm not going to record the entire session because I will move in fits and starts through possibly days. And then we'll edit together some of the juicy bits and we'll see how that works. Just briefly, for what I'm doing is I'm using gptel with a preset prompt. And we can see what that means if I say gptel send and go over here. I currently have eliminated all my other presets and I only have the Python coder prompt. The Python coder prompt is in fact a conglomeration of a whole bunch of things. So I'm not actually going to have it respond to me as BoJack Horseman. That's just kind of an experiment right now. But we're going to have a section where the LLM and the human have a bit of a backstory. In other words, this is roles. And I put the human as a role in this case too, because it really pares down the bootlicking and glazing that you get from LLMs ordinarily, so that you come up with, oh, I found something that seems to be a bug in the code you produced, and it will say, oh my God, you're the most brilliant debugger in the history of the universe, and all that nonsense. If you're both defined as experts to each other, then there's less of that. And so it's an interesting thing. We're using org mode instead of Markdown, which is a recent thing I found that is actually doable with mini models, whereas just a year ago it was not. They could only produce Markdown mode no matter what they told you they could do. There's a project awareness, there's documentation and explainability, so much like you see with Claude examples from the past, we're going to keep a task list and a README and a planning and all that kind of thing. And then things that are more specific, not just to coding, but to Python itself. And we'll probably expand this prompt as we go. At any rate, we'll get into that later, but this is just an introduction. The rest will be pretty much screen shares and heavily edited bits of my progress along the way. Starting off with a brand new project, it really has absolutely nothing in it currently, called Cryptogrammer. My intention is to create a back end and a front end to help solve simple substitution cryptograms, so substitution ciphers. My favorite kind of puzzle when I was 12 years old. So I had at one point, many years ago, done a green screen implementation of a nice solver, not a programmatic solver, but something that helps a person solve the thing by showing letter frequencies in a given cryptogram and doing searches for patterns of words, things like that. So I am going to do that and start it off in this empty directory. It's not even git initted yet. And I'm going to do it in the prompt that I have shown before, which is, as Andrei Karpathy said, there's this autonomy slider you can use in coding sessions where you either set it all the way to the right and you just want the AI to do everything. You say, make me a clone of Uber, and it just goes off and does that. Or where you are coding and you ask for the production of some tests, some unit tests or documentation or whatever it is that you ordinarily don't do because it's annoying. But what I've done is, for my enjoyment and level of participation that I want and learning that I want, I set the slider right in the middle. And so the human is as much a part of the project as the LLM. I will be doing code review. I may add things to the task list manually and say, oh, but by the way, I slipped one in on you, and your planning.org just got larger, or things like that. So please go reread the file and let's refactor a little bit. Or in any event, I will have to be the arbiter that makes the git commit. I am not going to allow the LLM to make the get message and check it in. All that's fun. It's interesting. If you do it as the LLM can only make pull requests, for example, then you still have a review process, but you have weird comments and weird combinations of commits and things like that. So I just like to keep control of that. And then for executing code, rather than provide a sandbox environment where the LLM can execute the code, I ask it to create code blocks in org mode, source code blocks, that I then execute so that we can both review the results. And I will execute it in an inferior shell or a REPL, so that the environment is complete and correct according to the code we've produced. So that reduces all kinds of complexity and confusion, and I mean confusion on the LLM's part, and reduces time and increases joy. So that's what we're going to do, and this is the environment we will start out in. I will start with, I believe, just a normal gptel chat window. So let's do that with metax gptel. And the last model I used was Anthropic, so it's suggesting the buffer name Anthropic. I will say, let's use buffer name Gemini. And we're going to need to do a bunch of setup, or some degree of setup. So here's how we do it. Control-U-C, return. And I'm going to choose the model, which is going to be Gemini 2.5 Pro. I've just had a lot of enjoyment using that model recently, so that's what we'll go with. And then as far as the system message, it's already set correctly. My prompt is this Python coder preset, and it is a rather long one. If I look at this buffer here of the prompt, it is about 140 lines. We'll say 137 lines actually, without the comments. And it involves many, many things: role, documentation expected, how we do planning together, what my role is, what your role is, how we interact, when I expect you to ask me for something, and things like that. All right, and then let's do that again. And I want to set certain things, like I do want to add something to the context. What do I have there currently? I have the org mode syntax cheat sheet for LLMs. So I do want to include that, because since I'm asking the LLM to write things in org mode, then it should know how to do that if it has any doubts whatsoever. So we are going to say that for reasoning, you include reasoning. I want to see it. I want to see the reasoning blocks, but I don't want to send the result of those reasoning blocks back to the LLM in subsequent turns. because that tends to confuse things and rack up the bill quite a bit. So that's this setting, include reasoning and ignore. You can also say never include reasoning within the buffer. Yes, always include it within the buffer and keep it as part of the context. It goes back and forth. Ignore it, which is what my current setting is, or yes, but put it into a different buffer so it's not even part of this context at all. And then I can go and check that other buffer from time to time if I'm curious about some of the reasoning that it's done. So Control G out of there. And then we're going to give it tools. So the tools that I want to do, actually, I have the MCP server running, so I want to do some of these things. I already have all of the MCP terminal controller, which is an MCP server, running. I've got all of those selected. This allows the LLM to read and write files, to change the working directory, very important for us as it turns out, and to even execute shell commands, which is a little bit scary given that I have a passwordless sudo on my user account. But if it goes rogue, I will suffer. And then what other tools? And then I've got a set of reflection tools that I've written in Emacs Lisp to do things that are ways to look up functions and variables, just like you would use Control HV or Control HF to look up functions, variables, info pages, function source, readmes even, and then maybe some environmental things like man pages that are on the system. And I think there's supposed to be another one in here that isn't showing right now, but I'll look into that later. Okay, so we have the tools that we want to provide the LLM to start with. And then what we do now is we give it a lot of context. Do not just say, make me an Uber clone. Pretend that you are talking, you are handing a project off as an experienced programmer or as a programming manager. You're handing something off to someone who knows what they're doing as a programmer, but they're unfamiliar with your environment. They can't read your mind. They're an actual human being or an actual LLM. In this case, it's kind of the same thing. No, not really. I'm not sure I even want to keep that in there. But you're talking to an actual colleague who knows how to code, but really deserves some benefit of the doubt of giving them everything that they need to take off and run with the project. So I spent a lot of time in my initial prompt, as we will see. All right, I'm going to start with this prompt. And it says, I want to start a project with a simple web front end. An encoder and solver or a helper for simple substitution ciphers, commonly called cryptograms or crypto quizzes. Tell it where its root directory is. Tell it what I want to use for the back end. Telling it I don't know entirely what to do about the front end and I want suggestions. I'll tell you that I will start by initiating a git repo in this directory. And I have also probably made a promise that I haven't followed through on yet. Oh, yes, I have included in our context a portion of what I want in the backend written in Common Lisp. Let me do that. I'm going to add a file or two here. There we go. It'll have some code and it will know basically what I want to do. So let's watch this. This is the very first prompt to get going. So again, I have asked in my extended prompt to show me reasoning and all that. So let's see what it does. Control C, enter. says waiting, and then as it goes, we'll see that it started a reasoning block, which was very short. So it's already got its task planned. I'm not in the right place. So it's changing the working directory to the correct one and is now claiming to be creating files, which it actually is doing. Isn't that fun? So it's now creating the things that I've asked it to do. Oh, it's giving me initial questions. Excellent. And it's really truly starting a Python project. Okay, now it's a good time for you to add because it can see that I had not done it. Little bastard. Okay, get init. All right, now if we run Magit on there, we'll get our untracked files. In the beginning there was darkness. So I will have to add all those in. And I will say, I will do exactly what it's telling me. I'll create initial commit. And there's nothing to push it to because this is just local. It's not tied to GitHub now. Now let's take a quick look at what it has done. It has created a cryptogrammar with some Python files already. Oh, looks like they're all empty. That's fine. That's a great idea. Expecting to have a database, expecting to have a CRUD operations. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And then expecting to have tests using a PyTest framework. It has created, let's see what it did in environments. It knows we'll need fast API and UVI corn to run it. Sqlalchemy is a very good choice for any kind of a database. Pydantic, .env, because we may have secrets, I suppose, and request, because we're going to be pulling things from the web. Why? Because in the Lisp code, you can ask for a quotation from a quotation service as your cryptogram. Okay, cool. And then see, I'm grinning because this is just so much fun. So I've made a very, very simple readme.org with places to fill in for usage and how you contribute and so forth, and a very largish 59 lines of planning. Front end, we don't know yet. Data model is probably going to need these things. ID content author, yeah, probably so. We had something like that on my common list project. And then tasks. Okay, fair enough. Love it. It's very exciting to see this in all these steps. So this is how we start. And let me see what it's prompting me for. I've completed the initial project, ready to move on to the database and API development. Please review my work, answer my questions when you have a chance. So I will say I have committed all files. Looks like a great start. And please answer my questions when you have a moment. Your questions are way back here. Okay, do we want authentication? This thing is fun and really usable. It would be good to put it in. And I'm terrible at authentication, like anything other than basic authentication. Terrible at it. Quotation source. Yeah, we should definitely consider others. Okay, so I'll answer these questions and we will continue apace. After some time and interruptions, I have come back and done my get init and answered the questions that the AI started with for me. So talking about our sources that it gleaned from the common Lisp code, asking about authentication and frameworks and deployment method. all good questions. So let's see where we go from here. Okay, this is interesting because ordinarily I would say I want to make the virtual environment. And in fact, in the past with this same Python coding system prompt, the AI stopped and asked me to do that. In this case, it says it's going to do that, and it does in fact have access to a shell command capability. So we'll see what it does. I'm interested in seeing this. Go ahead. Okay, after a short period of time, I executed gptel-abort and then just added my own prompt in here and said, please continue. Looks like the tool call hung. And so you are correct. And it then goes through several tries to update the planning.org file and had problems with using the just replace this chunk or just append to the file at this point. For some reason, that tool does not work well for that, and the LLM ends up saying, okay, I give up, I'll just read the entire file and write it back again with its changes. And that works fine, but it's disappointing that the tool doesn't work. That particular tool doesn't work well for this, so I'll have to look into that. At any rate, it goes through and updated planning and task, and now starts working on Sqlalchemy models to come up with our initial SQLite schemas, which is just so cool. And it's writing Python code to do that. And now what it claims at the end is after all of that, I will now be able to start this thing up and actually see it in the web browser to test the quotations endpoint, or not the web browser, but really this is docs. So we're not seeing API calls yet, we're just looking at docs. I might as well see if that actually works. What I need to do though is make sure that I have a Python environment that I can work with, and it doesn't look like I do. I don't see a .venv or a venv here, so I think it did not do that. Anyway, I'll work through this and tell you what happened when I resolved it all. A quick update. After a few go-rounds, we have an API that works to get quotations from Vercel.app on the internet, and or from the fortune command, given various databases that are in fortune. And we can have a minimum length in our API call so that we get longer fortunes or not. Okay, so all of those things began to work. The LLM wrote for me these little test code blocks. I executed them with Control-C, Control-C, and we see the results. So I said, I verified the above and committed all changes, and note the way I did it. So hopefully it will do that as I did it, these code blocks in the future. If not, then I'll give more explicit instruction. So I said that the next thing we want to do is get cryptograms, actually encrypted quotations, not just clear text quotations, and indicated what supporting functions we might need. It said that sounds like a great next step. And here's an outline for our planning.org and our tasks.org. So planning enhancements and task list. Now it didn't actually write these files. It let me review them and then say it was okay. And then it asked me, will we need to have bijection or bijective substitution keys. In this case, that is a very important thing. One letter must correspond to one letter on the input and the output. So we need to check for that. So that was a good question to ask. Do we want the cryptogram stored, etc.? So I said yes, must be bijective. I don't want to store the cryptograms, etc., etc., etc. We certainly don't need performance optimization for a single generation of at a time. So at any rate, this is what it will do. After all of that, it says I'll write, oh no, it says it's planning to do. So I'll write these updates into the org files if everything looks satisfactory. So I answered looks good to me, just like I might do after reviewing a pull request. And so then it actually did those things and did all of the planning stuff and then said, okay, we are now ready to proceed with coding, so let's do. Proceed. And then it's going to go off and do that. I think after this coding step, I'll have everything ready to go and then turn my attention to the front end, which is a brand new thing for me. I have not used this type of tool with front end development, believe it or not, but for true vibe coding, that's a must. So we're going to do that. And I will return after some of that has been done. All right, after several more iterations, I have reached the point where the back end is done pretty much. And that includes things like returning letter frequency for given cryptograms to aid the solver, and having the option to return quotations or fortunes in unencrypted or encrypted form. And all that is great. I then asked for tests and documentations. To this point, no tests had been written. So it did some basically unit tests and integration tests using PyTest. And I started having a lot of problems where the LLM was claiming to have written changes to files but had not actually done it. And then was in its reasoning and its thinking process saying, wow, I'm getting incredibly frustrated, says the LLM. I claim to have done something, but I didn't actually do it. And it kept doing, it kind of started getting worse and worse. At this point, my context has grown to, be something like over 200,000. I started trimming that down by removing the result of tool calls primarily, and doing some other things that were, debugging steps or just random questions that were just cluttering up the context. But that's a lot of manual work to have to do. And this thing, Gemini 2.5 Pro, supposedly has 1 million token context. But as things start getting large, you definitely tend to notice degradation. So it started getting very frustrating. I got to the point where we finally got PyTest running with the integration tests, and all we had is deprecation warnings. So everything was successful, but we had deprecation warnings for certain things in the code. So I suggested that we place those, we not worry about that for now. We place them kind of on our task list to do in our backlog, but then proceed with functional stuff. However, what the LLM did is I know what these deprecation warnings are, and I'll just go ahead and fix them. And I said, well, if you already know what they are and you don't have to do reading on it and go to URLs to understand what's going on, then yeah, go ahead and fix it. Which it proceeded to not do. It said it did it, but again, it once again failed to update the file. And then I said, well, I saw you read the file but not write the file. So then it says, well, gosh darn it, and it did the writing of the fixes that it was considering. However, it did a lot more than that. And suddenly the web server wouldn't run at all. Let me show you in Magit. I have everything checked in now that is working, and changes stashed that it made in addition to the deprecation warning stuff. Like, it just decided to fundamentally rewrite and refactor all kinds of things. It did a lot more than 3 simple fixes to silence deprecation warnings. And I'm now going through the code to try to determine what its intention might have been for some of the refactoring, but it broke everything. So I went and stashed the entire thing and then went one by one to understand and fix the deprecation warnings myself. And at this point, we're going to have a come to Jesus meeting here to say, something's not working anymore. Do I need to completely change the context? So maybe you could summarize everything that's going on to now, and then we'll proceed. Okay, we're at the perfect ending point because we have come to a denouement for pass 1 here, where we have a fully working back end, and that's great. So, as I mentioned, we have many problems though with the LLM doing things that it's supposed to do. So I said, all right, and I showed the result of PyTest where everything passed with no deprecation warnings now. So on the one hand, we have all tests passing. On the other hand, you did much more in the last round than silence deprecation warnings. There was also code refactoring in multiple source files, and that absolutely broke the whole thing. It wouldn't run. And there were many changes to like all of the Python files, and I'm not going to debug all that. So I stashed everything. I stashed everything it did, and then I went manually through one at a time, just do the deprecation things until they were fixed, and so forth. So I said, I would like to be able to summarize all lessons learned to this point so that I can drastically reduce the context. So I said, context size and clutter may be contributing. That, you, the LLM, forgetting to write the damn files that you're claiming to have written only happened in the last few turns. The MCP terminal controller tool that I'm using, or set of tools to allow the LLM to write files, is clearly not working well. And it's clearly a point of lots of frustration and it is error prone for sure. It seems very brittle. So I want suggestions as to, if you had your druthers, what would the file tool calls look like? Because this is going to branch off into a completely different topic. I have looked for file editors left and right, and I cannot find a good one that I think is good, like that would actually be useful to me to change files from a command line thing as an MCP server. That's specifically what I'm looking for. Therefore, I think I'll just write one. I think I'm going to write one in Emacs Lisp, in fact, and have it just as gptel. And then the given work system prompt is a work in process, what might be added to it to improve. And then we should capture all progress to this point in a way that a fresh chat session would enable an LLM to hit the ground running. But don't worry, I'll keep this one open for us, though with some reduction in clutter. Smiley face. So it says context size is definitely an issue. I can get distracted by outdated error messages or file content from several turns ago, and it becomes harder to distinguish the last successful state from a previous failed attempt. I noted this from like 2 years ago when I first started playing with LLMs. It's like, you'd point out an error in the LLM and say, oh, I totally get it, yes, okay, I will not do that from now on, and we'll do it this way. And then it kept doing, the more you had it as a context, of course, the more it would start doing it. It makes sense if you think about it, because it has more bad examples than it has of good examples. So it's not like a human that doesn't have all that context, and we can forget that stuff and just go on. It's processing everything every single time. Enough said. We should practice context hygiene. Then about that subpar file management tool, it certainly agrees with me and says these are what I would like for a less brittle way to edit files. And I think this looks really good. I think I'm just going to take this in a separate session and write the damn tool that I will be happy with, and that my various LLMs will be happy with. Okay, improving the system prompt, and it did just what I wanted it to. Not try to rewrite a new system prompt, but to say, hey, let's add these things, like the file operation mandate. Make sure always make this, it's an absolute mandate to verify what you have written before you report it to make sure it's correct. If tools become frustrating or difficult or unwieldy, then you could even ask the human for a different approach, which is great. And more strongly formalize human in the loop to always ask to confirm state, which I think is great. For my purposes, it's great. I don't want to the autonomy slider again to be all the way to the right. I want to be in there and learning and verifying. And then to summarize progress for a fresh start, okay, basically it's telling me once I have this in here, we can pretty much rip out all the stuff that went before so we don't get confused. I could literally put that in a separate gptel file. It's like this was phase 1, now we're doing phase 2, and it says, so for any fresh start, this is what we're doing. This is what the project looks like. These are its purposes. These are the files that are part of it. These are my API endpoints, and so forth. And by the way, this is not all in the README yet of this project, so it's perfect to put in that README also. So I think this is very good, and I've definitely learned a lot. We may or may not have a phase 2 for the front end, but I think this is good for now.